None of the 20 doctors managed to save the millionaire, even with all the technology and prestige at their disposal. But it was a black maid, ignored in the hospital corridors, who uncovered the truth everyone refused to see. She stood up to the system, challenged the experts, and exposed a cruel poisoning coming from within the very company. Her name, once forgotten, became a symbol of justice, and her story silenced the powerful who once laughed at her. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing, Joanna Scott's fingers ached as she scrubbed the gleaming floor of St. Jude's Hospital's main corridor, the most exclusive hospital in London. The clock showed 2 in the morning, a time when doctors rarely appeared, and patients were surrendered to sleep induced by expensive medications. It was the perfect time to clean without disturbing anyone, and without being disturbed. At 35, Joanna had grown accustomed to the invisibility her light blue uniform afforded her. It was as if the badge that simply read General Services erased her history, her dreams and her intelligence. As she methodically pushed the mop, her thoughts wandered to the tiny apartment on the outskirts of Eastwick, where her children, Peter and Mary, slept under the care of the neighbor, Mrs. Edna, an elderly woman who charged little to look after the children during the night shift. A sigh escaped her lips as she remembered the overdue electricity bill and Peter's technical course tuition, due next week. Life had not been generous to Joanna since her parents died in an accident, forcing her to abandon her chemistry degree, where she was a scholarship student and a standout in toxicological analysis research. Her daydream was interrupted by the sound of elevator doors opening. Strange for that hour, Joanna quickly pushed her cleaning cart into a corner, becoming even more invisible. A group of doctors, at least 8 of them, walked hurriedly down the freshly cleaned corridor, leaving marks of expensive shoes on the floor she had just polished. In the center of the medical entourage, a stretcher carried a well-to-do man, pale-skinned and disoriented. "We need more tests. His condition is worsening," said an authoritative female voice, which Joanna recognized as belonging to Dr. Helen Foster, the hospital's clinical director. "We've already done all possible tests, Dr. Foster. We haven't found anything to explain this condition," replied a younger doctor. Joanna remained motionless, just observing the unusual scene. The man on the stretcher seemed important, judging by the unusual commotion and the concern etched on the doctors' faces. When the group turned down the corridor, she could get a better look at the patient's face and recognized him immediately. Richard Morrison, the construction magnate owner of Morrison Tech, one of the largest technology and infrastructure companies in the United Kingdom. His face frequently graced business magazines and newspapers. What could be happening to him? And why did so many doctors seem lost? After the group passed, Joanna returned to her work, but her scientist's mind, never entirely dormant, began to process what she had seen. There was something wrong with that man, something that apparently confused even the most renowned doctors in the country. The next morning, already home after her long shift, Joanna was preparing breakfast for her children while watching the news on the small kitchen television. The reporter, with a serious expression, announced, "Businessman Richard Morrison remains hospitalized at St. Jude's Hospital with an unidentified illness. Sources close to him state that the country's top specialists have been called in, but there is still no precise diagnosis." "Mom, you work at that hospital, right?" asked Peter, 12, as he bit into a slice of bread with margarine. "Yes, son. That's where I clean at night. Have you seen that rich man?" asked Mary, just 8, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Joanna hesitated. "Yes, I did. Last night." "And is he really very sick?" Peter insisted. "I don't know for sure, son." The doctors were worried. As the children finished breakfast and got ready for school, Joanna couldn't get the image of Richard Morrison out of her head. There was something familiar about those symptoms, something she couldn't quite pinpoint. After dropping the children off at the neighborhood public school, she headed to the municipal library. It wasn't an unusual habit. Whenever she could, Joanna spent a few hours there, reading scientific articles and keeping her passion for chemistry alive. That afternoon, on one of the library's old computers, she researched Richard Morrison, finding recent reports that mentioned his mysterious condition. A video captured at a business event showed the moment the businessman had an episode of mental confusion, being supported by his partner, Edward Allen. before being rushed to the hospital. As she watched the video for the third time, Joanna noticed something that made her freeze. Richard's hand trembled peculiarly, and there was a strange stain on the side of his neck, visible when his shirt collar shifted during the incident. That sparked a distant memory from her toxicology classes. In the following hours, she delved into scientific articles, using the municipal library's limited access. When the clock struck 3 p.m., Joanna had to rush out to pick up the children from school. Her mind, however, was buzzing with ideas and theories she needed to confirm. That night, upon arriving at St. Jude's Hospital for her shift, Joanna was determined to observe the VIP patient more closely. She knew that the exclusive wing where Richard was hospitalized was on the 10th floor with restricted access. Normally, only the day cleaning staff took care of that area, but Joanna had an idea. "Maureen, I need to switch sectors today," she told her supervisor, the middle-aged woman with a constantly suspicious expression. "And may I ask why?" Maureen asked without looking up from the spreadsheet she was filling out. "My colleague Teresa isn't feeling well and asked me to cover her sector." Maureen looked up, assessing Joanna with suspicion. "Which sector?" 10th floor East Wing." The supervisor narrowed her eyes. "The VIP wing." "You've never worked there, Joanna. You need special authorization. Teresa explained everything to me. I know how it works." After a moment of hesitation, Maureen nodded. "All right, but any problems, it's your responsibility. And tell Teresa that next time she should speak to me herself." With her heart pounding, Joanna grabbed her cleaning cart and went up to the 10th floor. The contrast with the other floors was evident. Marble flooring, artwork on the walls, designer furniture, and a sepulchral silence broken only by the beeping of machines. Following the instructions on the temporary visitor badge, she began cleaning the corridors, gradually approaching the room where Richard was. Through the half-open door, she could see the businessman connected to various machines. His skin had a yellowish hue, and his hair, once grey and neatly trimmed, seemed to be falling out in some spots. Beside the bed, a man in an impeccable suit spoke in a low voice with a doctor. It was Edward Allen, Richard's partner, whom Joanna had seen in the news reports. "How long until he fully recovers, doctor?" Edward asked with what seemed to be genuine concern. "Honestly, Mr. Allen, we don't know. I've never seen anything like it. The symptoms don't match any known illness, and he's not responding to conventional treatments." Edward shook his head in apparent frustration. "The merger with the Asian group is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Richard needs to be present or everything could be jeopardized. We're doing our best, but I can't guarantee anything." Edward approached the bed and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Rest, Richard. Let me take care of everything while you recover." While pretending to clean the area near the door, Joanna noticed something on the bedside table, a small bottle of hand cream. It seemed harmless, but its position indicated frequent use. Her scientific instinct immediately raised an alarm in her mind. She needed to investigate further. When Edward and the doctor left, Joanna took the opportunity to enter the room, pretending she needed to empty the trash can. Richard was asleep, probably sedated. Up close, the symptoms were even more evident. In addition to the yellowish skin, there were small spots on the palms of his hands, and his fingernails showed horizontal white lines. These signs, combined with what she had observed in the video and what she had heard from the doctors, began to form a worrying picture in her mind. As she left the room, Joanna was surprised by the presence of a young doctor, who looked at her with curiosity. "What were you doing in there?" the doctor asked without hostility, just curiosity. "Sorry, doctor. I was just emptying the trash," Joanna replied, keeping her eyes down. The doctor nodded but continued to observe Joanna for a moment. "You're new on this floor, aren't you?" "Yes, I'm covering for a colleague. I'm Dr. Camilla Thompson, a toxicologist. If you need anything, I'll be in the room at the end of the corridor." Joanna thanked her with a nod and walked away, pushing her cart. Toxicologist? That could be useful. Perhaps if her suspicions were confirmed, Dr. Thompson would be the right person to hear her theories. But first she needed proof. No one would believe the word of a cleaner, no matter how brilliant she had been in college years ago. That night, after finishing her shift, Joanna didn't go straight home. She stopped at a 24-hour pharmacy and bought some basic items. Her small salary barely covered her family's needs, but she needed those materials for the experiment she was planning. At home, in the tiny room she shared with her children, she set up a makeshift laboratory under the bed. It was risky and primitive, but it might be enough to confirm her suspicions. If she was right, Richard Morrison's life depended on someone noticing what was happening. And apparently that someone would be an invisible cleaner with a brilliant academic past and a present of daily struggles. 3 days passed since Joanna began her clandestine investigation. In a worn notebook, she meticulously recorded Edward Allen's visiting hours, the medications administered to Richard, and the symptoms she could observe during her quick forays into the room. She had managed to convince Maureen to keep her in the VIP wing for a few more days, inventing a story about Teresa still being sick. "What's wrong with that woman? She should come and explain it to me personally," Maureen complained, but eventually gave in. That morning, Joanna used her day off to visit the library again. Sitting in front of the old computer, she researched substances that could cause the observed symptoms: progressive weakness, hair loss, skin lesions, neurological problems, fingernails with white lines. With each scientific article she read, she became more certain of her initial theory. Heavy metal, she murmured to herself, frantically writing in her notebook, already filled with chemical and medical notes, thallium or arsenic. Beside the computer, she placed the small bottle she had obtained the previous night, a minuscule sample of Richard Morrison's hand cream, discreetly collected when the room was empty. It was risky but necessary. Joanna needed to confirm her suspicions. When the library clock struck noon, she put her notes in her worn bag and headed to a small chemical supply store in the city center. The establishment, frequented mainly by university students, sold basic reagents for home laboratories. "Good morning. I need dithizone and ammonium chloride, please," she asked the attendant, a bored-looking young man with glasses. "Are you a chemistry student?" he asked, looking up from his phone. "I was, a long time ago," Joanna replied with a melancholic smile. The young man nodded without much interest and separated the products. "These are basic products, but remember to use gloves." "I always do," she replied, paying with the few notes she had set aside for that purchase. Back at the apartment, Joanna took advantage of the children being at school to set up her small experiment in the service area. Carefully, she mixed a drop of the cream with the reagents she had bought. If there was heavy metal in the sample, the solution would change color. "Mom, we're home," Mary shouted, interrupting Joanna's concentration, who quickly put all the material in a box under the sink. "Hi, my loves. How was school today?" "Good, but the math teacher was absent," Peter replied, throwing his backpack on the sofa. "Mom, Fernanda invited me to her birthday party on Saturday," Mary said, her eyes shining with anticipation. Joanna felt a pang in her heart. Parties meant presents, and presents meant money she didn't have. "That's great, honey. Let's see what we can do." While preparing a simple lunch for the children, Joanna thought about her unfinished experiment and the consequences of her discoveries. If she was right, it wouldn't just be a medical matter, but a criminal one too. Someone was deliberately harming Richard Morrison. But how could a cleaner prove it? And to whom should she report her suspicions? That night, after putting the children to bed, Joanna returned to her improvised experiment. With precise movements, she conducted the test and carefully observed the color change. "Positive for thallium," she whispered, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Thallium, a highly toxic heavy metal, practically undetectable in conventional tests, unless one knew exactly what to look for. It was used in electronics and special glasses, but had been banned from many products due to its toxicity. The symptoms of thallium poisoning corresponded exactly to what Richard Morrison was exhibiting. Joanna stayed up late, researching on her old cell phone with the cracked screen. She discovered that thallium poisoning was extremely rare, which would explain why the doctors hadn't considered this possibility. She also found information about the antidote, Prussian blue, a compound that could neutralize the metal in the body. The next morning, with deep dark circles under her eyes, Joanna dropped the children off at school and did something she had never done before. She went to the hospital during the day. Without her uniform, she was just another ordinary person at the reception. She asked to speak with Dr. Camilla Thompson. "The doctor is in a meeting," the receptionist informed her, looking at her with suspicion. "Are you a patient?" "No, but I have important information about a case she is treating." "And you are—" "Joanna Scott. I work here on the night cleaning team. The receptionist's expression subtly changed, a mixture of surprise and disdain. I'm sorry, but Dr. Thompson only sees people by appointment, and only health professionals or patients. Joanna took a deep breath, controlling her frustration. Please, it's really important. It's about Mr. Morrison's case. You are not authorized to discuss patient cases, the receptionist replied coldly. I suggest you return during your working hours and speak with your supervisor. Defeated, Joanna left the hospital. On the way to the library, she formulated a new plan. If they wouldn't listen to her directly, she would leave an anonymous note with her findings in the doctor's lounge. She wrote in detail her theory about thallium poisoning, mentioning the hand cream as the probable source, and described the simple tests that could confirm her suspicion. Without signing, she placed the note in an envelope and during her shift that night, discreetly left it in the medical meeting room. 2 days passed without any visible reaction. Joanna continued to observe, write notes, monitor. Richard's condition seemed to worsen gradually. He spent more time sedated, and the doctors appeared increasingly frustrated. During a shift change, she overheard 2 doctors talking in the corridor. I've seen everything in medicine, but this is driving me crazy, said one of them. A gray-haired gentleman with a tired look. All tests come back normal or inconclusive. It's as if he's being poisoned by something we can't detect, replied the other. The word poisoned made Joanna freeze. They were close to the truth, but they hadn't gotten there yet. That same night, while cleaning the meeting room, she found her envelope open on the table, with red marks over her notes and a handwritten comment. Absurd theory. Probably written by some medical student trying to impress. The disregard felt like a slap in the face. Tears of frustration welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She couldn't give up. A man's life was at stake, and only she seemed to have the answers. The next morning, Joanna called the school to report that her children would need to miss class due to illness. Instead, she took them to spend the day at Mrs. Edna's house, the neighbor who usually looked after them at night. Has something happened, Joanna? You look terrible, the elderly woman commented, as she served the children a glass of juice. I just need to take care of some things today. Mrs. Edna, I really appreciate you looking after them. You know you can count on me, my dear. Go with God. With the children safe, Joanna headed to the only place she thought she could find help, the University of London, where she had studied years ago. She knew it would be difficult to be received, but she had to try. In the chemistry department, she looked for her former advisor, Professor Matthew Carter, one of the few who had believed in her potential when she was a student. To her surprise, he was still teaching and agreed to see her between classes. "Joanna Scott!" exclaimed the professor, a 60-year-old man with white hair and a gentle expression. "It's been so long. I always wondered what had happened to you." "Life happened." "Professor," she replied with a sad smile, before quickly explaining her current situation. When she mentioned her suspicions about Richard Morrison's case, the professor became serious. "Thallium is extremely toxic and difficult to detect. If you're right, it's a very serious situation." "I am right, Professor. I did the test with dithizone, it came back positive. But no one at the hospital listens to me. I'm just the cleaner." The professor adjusted his glasses, pensive. "We need more evidence, something they can't ignore. Do you have access to the hospital's laboratory?" "Not officially, but I can get in." "That's risky, Joanna. You could lose your job or worse." "A man could lose his life, Professor." "It's worth the risk." After some deliberation, Professor Matthew devised a detailed plan with Joanna. He provided her with a simple but effective kit for detecting thallium in organic samples, something more sophisticated than her homemade test, but still portable and discreet. He also gave her an official letter on university letterhead, explaining the theory and requesting that the responsible doctors consider the possibility of heavy metal poisoning. "This should give your argument more credibility," he explained. "And if needed, I can personally go to the hospital as a consultant." "Thank you, Professor." "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by remaining brilliant even in the most difficult circumstances," he replied with a warm smile. "And when all this is over, come see me. Perhaps we can find a way for you to resume your studies." With renewed hope, Joanna left the university. On her way to pick up the children, she stopped at a pharmacy and bought a small bottle of vitamins. a modest gift for Mary's birthday party invitation. It wasn't much, but it was what she could offer at the moment. That night, upon arriving at the hospital, Joanna had a clear plan: collect a larger sample of the cream, perform the more sophisticated test provided by the professor, document everything with her cell phone, and then directly seek out Dr. Camilla Thompson with the evidence and the university letter. What she didn't expect was to find Edward Allen in Richard's room, alone, at such a late hour. Hidden behind the half-open door, she watched as he opened a bottle of cream and, with gloved hands, carefully applied it to the sleeping patient's arms and neck. "Soon everything will be resolved." "My friend," Edward murmured in a tone that sent shivers down Joanna's spine, "I just need you to sign the merger documents transferring control to me, and then you can miraculously recover." Joanna covered her mouth to stifle a gasp of horror. Her suspicions had just been confirmed in the worst possible way. The partner and supposed best friend was slowly poisoning Richard Morrison, probably to gain control of the company before the important merger mentioned in the news. Edward put the cream bottle into a small toiletry bag and headed for the door. Joanna quickly moved away, hiding in a supply closet. As he passed down the corridor, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Edward limped slightly on his right leg, a detail that might be useful later. With her heart pounding, Joanna waited a few minutes and then entered Richard's room. Quickly, she collected a sample of the freshly applied cream and performed the test with the professor's kit. As expected, the result was positive, even more evident than the previous one. "Now I have proof," she whispered to herself, photographing the result with her old cell phone. As she left the room, Joanna almost collided with a nurse. "What are you doing here?" "VIP patients should not be disturbed during the night," the nurse said severely. "Sorry, I was just checking if the trash needed to be collected," Joanna replied, trying to stay calm. "That can wait until tomorrow. Please leave now." Joanna nodded and walked away, but her mind worked frantically. She needed to act fast. Richard was being poisoned at that very moment, and she had the evidence in her hands. The next step would be to convince someone in authority to believe her, a task almost as difficult as discovering the poisoning in the first place. The morning light had barely broken when Joanna, after an exhausting shift, headed to the room where Dr. Camilla Thompson usually worked. She had monitored the doctor's routine for days and knew that she arrived early, usually before the other specialists. It was her best chance to have an uninterrupted conversation. With trembling hands, Joanna knocked on the half-open door. Dr. Thompson, a black woman of about 40, with curly hair tied in an elegant bun and a keen gaze, looked up from the documents she was analyzing. "Yes?" she asked, frowning slightly at seeing a cleaning staff member in her office. "Good morning, Dr. Thompson. My name is Joanna Scott. I work on the night team," she began nervously. "I need to speak with you about Mr. Richard Morrison's case." The doctor leaned back in her chair, visibly confused by the approach. "And why would you be speaking to me about a patient?" "Because I believe he is being poisoned with thallium, and I have proof," Joanna replied, placing her cell phone with the test photos, the cream sample, and the university letter on the table. The silence that followed was dense. Dr. Thompson looked at the items on the table, then at Joanna, in a mixture of surprise and disbelief. "Are you telling me you conducted chemical tests on your own on a patient's products?" she finally asked, her tone oscillating between professional curiosity and disapproval. "I know it seems irregular, Doctor, but I observed the symptoms and they correspond perfectly to thallium poisoning. No one was considering this possibility, and I have the technical knowledge to recognize them." "Technical knowledge?" The doctor raised an eyebrow, not disguising her distrust. "I was a chemistry student at the University of London," Joanna quickly explained, "specializing in toxicology. I had to drop out in my final year when my parents—" She hesitated, looking away. "When I had to take on family responsibilities." Dr. Thompson picked up the university letter and examined it carefully. "Professor Matthew Carter. I know his work. He is respected in the field." "He was my advisor," Joanna confirmed. "Please, doctor, I know it's hard to believe me, but see the results for yourself. The thallium is in the hand cream that Mr. Edward Allen regularly brings to the patient." The doctor hesitated, visibly torn between protocol and scientific curiosity. "Let's assume you're right. Why would someone do this?" I heard Mr. Allen talking about a corporate merger and transfer of control. I believe he is gradually poisoning Mr. Morrison to incapacitate him mentally before the signing of important documents. These are extremely serious accusations, the doctor warned, her tone hardening. And that's why I brought evidence, Joanna replied firmly. Thallium is practically undetectable in conventional tests unless you know exactly what to look for. That's why no doctor considered this possibility. But the symptoms are clear. Symmetrical hair loss, white lines on the nails, pain in the extremities, mental confusion, yellowish skin discoloration. Dr. Thompson looked again at the photos on Joanna's cell phone, then at the cream sample. Slowly, she took procedural gloves from a box on her desk and examined the material. Assuming you're right, she finally said, we would need to conduct official laboratory tests, following rigorous protocols. I cannot simply accuse someone of poisoning based on homemade tests, no matter how convincing they are. Of course I understand, Joanna agreed, feeling a glimmer of hope. But could you at least consider the possibility and request a specific test for thallium in the patient's blood? The doctor took a deep breath, thoughtful. I will analyze the material and discuss with the team the possibility of including this test in the next panel. Her expression became serious. But you need to understand that you have crossed several ethical and professional boundaries. This could cost you your job. If it saves Mr. Morrison's life, it's worth it, Joanna replied with conviction. Dr. Thompson nodded, a slight smile of respect appearing on her lips. Come back tomorrow at the same time. I'll see what I can find out by then. With a lighter heart than she had felt in days, Joanna left the hospital. On the crowded bus taking her home, she allowed herself a moment of hope. Perhaps someone would finally listen to her. This hope, however, was short-lived. The next morning, upon returning to speak with Dr. Thompson, she found not only the doctor, but also Dr. Helen Foster, the clinical director, and Maureen, her direct supervisor. Joanna Scott, Dr. Foster began coldly. I've been informed that you are conducting unauthorized investigations with patient materials, making unfounded accusations against reputable visitors, and approaching doctors outside appropriate channels. Joanna felt her blood run cold. She looked at Dr. Thompson, who maintained a neutral, unreadable expression. Dr. Foster, I can explain. There is no acceptable explanation for this behavior, the director interrupted. You are suspended for a week, and consider yourself fortunate that we are not involving the police or firing you immediately. But the patient is being poisoned. I have proof, Joanna insisted, desperate. The proof you presented was analyzed by Dr. Thompson and deemed inconclusive, Dr. Foster replied, casting a quick glance at the toxicologist. And even if there were any basis, your method of obtaining it was completely unethical and irregular. Maureen will escort you out, the director concluded. And when you return, I expect you to adhere exclusively to your duties. Another incident like this will result in immediate dismissal. Joanna looked at Dr. Thompson, seeking some sign of support, but the doctor merely averted her gaze, visibly uncomfortable. With a heavy heart, Joanna followed Maureen to the hospital exit. I always knew you'd be trouble, the supervisor murmured as they walked down the corridor. Thinking you're so smart, thinking you know more than the doctors. Joanna didn't respond. Her mind was focused on what would happen now. A week's suspension meant a week without pay, a devastating blow to her already precarious finances. More seriously, it meant Richard Morrison would continue to be poisoned, possibly to an irreversible point. Upon arriving home, she found Peter and Mary playing in the small shared yard of the housing complex. Mom, shouldn't you be sleeping now? Peter asked, surprised to see her arrive at that hour. I left work early today, son, she replied, forcing a smile. Let's enjoy some time together. During the simple lunch she prepared, Joanna tried to maintain a normal appearance so as not to worry the children, but her mind was racing. She couldn't simply give up and let a man be poisoned. She needed to find another way to act. Mom, are you okay? Mary asked, noticing her distracted state. Yes, my love. Just thinking about some things from work. Is it because of the sick man? That rich man you talked about, the girl insisted, perceptive as always. Joanna smiled melancholically. Her children knew her too well. Yes, honey. I'm trying to help, but it's complicated. Why is it complicated? Aren't you smart? Peter questioned with a child's direct logic. Being smart isn't always enough, son. Sometimes people don't listen, even when you're saying something important. Is it because you cleaned the floor? Mary asked, innocently. The teacher said all work is important, but some people don't respect it. Joanna felt a lump in her throat. That's about it, honey. But that's their stupidity, right? If someone knows the answer, it doesn't matter if they clean the floor or not. Peter concluded with the simple wisdom of his 12 years. Those words touched Joanna deeply. Her children were right. She knew the answer. And she couldn't give up just because people refused to listen to her because of her job. After putting the children to bed, Joanna sat at the kitchen table with her notebook. If she couldn't rely on the hospital system, she needed to find another way to act. Rereading her notes, she began to formulate a new plan. The next morning, she put on her best clothes, simple dress pants and a white blouse saved for special occasions, and headed to the headquarters of Morrison Tech, Richard Morrison's company. The imposing glass and steel building in London's financial district was intimidating, but Joanna was determined. At the reception, she was greeted by an impeccably dressed young woman. "Good morning, how can I help you?" "Good morning. I need to speak with Mr. Richard Morrison's assistants. It's an urgent matter related to his health." The receptionist examined her with suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's really urgent, please. I'm sorry, but without a prior appointment, I cannot authorize your entry. And I must inform you that Mr. Morrison is away due to health reasons." "That's exactly what I need to talk about," Joanna insisted. "Please, it's a matter of life or health." The firmness in her voice must have made an impact, as the receptionist hesitated. "I can try to speak with Ms. Claudia Miller, Mr. Morrison's executive assistant." "Your name, please?" "Joanna Scott." "And what is your relationship with the company or with Mr. Morrison?" Joanna hesitated. "I work at St. Jude's Hospital where he is hospitalized." The receptionist's eyes widened. "Are you a doctor?" "No, I'm part of the support staff," Joanna replied, avoiding mentioning her specific role. "Please wait a moment." After a few tense minutes, the receptionist returned. "Ms. Miller cannot receive you without a formal appointment. I suggest you contact her by email explaining the matter." Frustrated but not surprised, Joanna thanked her and left. On the way to the bus stop, an idea struck her. If she couldn't access the company executives, perhaps she could approach Richard's family. News reports about his hospitalization mentioned that his daughter, Laura Morrison, had rushed back from London, where she was studying, to be by her father's side. A quick search on her phone revealed that Laura was 25 and had a degree in administration from the London School of Economics. Several photos showed her at charity events, always elegant and with a determined expression that reminded Joanna of her father. Joanna decided to try a different approach. Using her savings, she bought a simple business card at a quick print shop, identifying herself as Joanna Scott, biochemistry consultant. It wasn't exactly a lie, she had the knowledge, just not the diplomas to prove it. With the card in hand, she returned to the hospital during visiting hours, this time as an ordinary visitor. At the reception, she stated that she had come to see Laura Morrison. To her surprise, she was allowed to go up after a brief check. On the 10th floor, she found Laura leaving her father's room. She was a tall young woman, with the same striking features as Richard, but with an expression of deep concern prematurely aging her face. "Ms. Morrison?" Joanna approached gently. "My name is Joanna Scott. I need to speak with you about your father's condition." Laura examined her cautiously. "Are you part of the medical team? I don't recall seeing you before." "Not exactly," Joanna replied, offering the card. "I'm a toxicologist and I believe I've identified what's affecting your father." "Toxicology?" Laura frowned. "The doctors have already ruled out poisoning. All tests came back negative. Because they're not looking for the right substance," Joanna explained, lowering her voice. "I believe your father is being poisoned with thallium, a heavy metal rarely tested for and extremely toxic." Laura's expression wavered between shock, disbelief, and a faint glimmer of hope. "How do you know this? And why aren't you talking to the doctors?" "I tried, but no one listened to me." "The thallium is in the hand cream that your Uncle Edward regularly brings," Joanna explained, carefully observing Laura's reaction to mentioning Edward. A flash of understanding crossed the young woman's face. Edward was always obsessed with the company, she murmured more to herself. Then, facing Joanna with renewed attention, "Do you have proof of this?" Joanna showed the photos of the tests on her cell phone and briefly explained the chemistry involved. Laura listened with surprising attention, occasionally asking pertinent questions that revealed a basic understanding of science. "Why are you doing this?" Laura finally asked. "Why do you care so much about what happens to my father?" The question caught Joanna by surprise. It was something she herself had wondered several times in the past few days. "Because it's the right thing to do," she replied simply. "Because I saw something wrong happening, and I have the knowledge to help. So I couldn't just ignore it." Laura studied her for a long moment, as if evaluating not just her words, but her essence. "I will speak with Dr. Helen Foster personally and demand the tests for thallium," she finally decided. "If you're right—" "The antidote is Prussian blue," Joanna interjected. "The faster it's administered, the better the chances of a full recovery." "Understood." Laura extended her hand, a formal gesture that contrasted with the tense atmosphere. "Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Regardless of the outcome, I appreciate your concern for my father." As she shook Laura's hand, Joanna felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. Finally, someone was taking her seriously. Perhaps, just perhaps, Richard Morrison had a chance. As she left the hospital, Joanna received a message from Maureen. "You were seen at the hospital today during your suspension. Report to administration tomorrow for dismissal procedures." The shock of the news was immediate, but not regret. She had done what her conscience demanded, even if the cost was her job. The question now was how she would support her children without that salary, however modest. Walking slowly to the bus stop, Joanna watched the sun set behind London's buildings. She had lost her job, but perhaps she had saved a life. Would that consolation be enough to feed her children? The future had never seemed so uncertain. Joanna's small apartment seemed even more cramped that morning. Sitting at the kitchen table, she stared at the dismissal letter received the day before, trying to calculate how long her savings would last. It wasn't an encouraging calculation, perhaps 2 weeks at most considering the overdue rent. "Mom, aren't you going to work today?" Mary asked, still in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "No, honey. Mom's staying home for a few days." "Are you sick?" Concern was evident in the girl's voice. "No, my love. I just had to leave that job," Joanna replied, trying to smile. "But I'll find another one soon, don't worry." Peter, who was watching the scene from the kitchen entrance, was old enough to understand the gravity of the situation. "It was because of that sick man, wasn't it?" "Because you tried to help," Joanna sighed. There was no point in hiding the truth from her children. "Yes, Peter, sometimes doing the right thing has a price. But that's not fair," the boy protested, indignant. "Many things in life aren't fair, son. But we can't let that stop us from doing what's right." She stood up and hugged them both. "We'll be okay, I promise. Now go get ready for school." After dropping the children off at school, Joanna headed to the city centre. She would immediately start looking for a new job. She couldn't waste time. With her incomplete resume and no recent references, she knew it would be difficult. But she was determined. After hours of delivering resumes to shops, restaurants and cleaning companies, she stopped at a small diner to rest. On her phone, no calls or messages. The feeling of invisibility she had experienced for years seemed even heavier now. While sipping a simple coffee, the diner's television showed a news report. The presenter, with a grave expression, announced, "The mystery surrounding businessman Richard Morrison's health continues. Sources close to him state that his condition has worsened in the last 48 hours, raising concerns about the future of Morrison Tech, whose shares have already fallen 15% since the beginning of his hospitalization." The image switched to Edward Allen, in front of St. Jude's Hospital, surrounded by reporters. "As vice president and founding partner, I am temporarily assuming the executive decisions of the company, as stipulated in our partnership agreement," he declared with a sorrowful but determined expression. "Our thoughts are with Richard and his family at this difficult time." Joanna felt a knot in her stomach. Edward was getting what he wanted, control of the company, and she had been silenced, removed from the hospital, unable to do anything more to stop the situation. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Ms. Scott, this is Laura Morrison. We need to talk urgently. Can you come to the hospital now?" Entrance via the garage, gate 3. Someone will be waiting for you. Joanna's heart pounded. Why would Laura be looking for her? Had she managed to convince the doctors to test her father for thallium? Or was it just to reprimand her for her conspiracy theories? With no alternative but curiosity, Joanna headed to the hospital. At the indicated gate, a security guard was waiting for her. "Miss Joanna Scott?" he asked as he saw her approach. "Yes, that's me. Please, follow me. Miss Morrison is waiting." Instead of taking her inside the hospital, the security guard led her down a side corridor to a small external meeting room, usually reserved for press conferences. Inside, she found not only Laura, but also Dr. Camilla Thompson and, to her surprise, her former advisor, Professor Matthew Carter. "Joanna, thank you for coming," Laura said, standing up to greet her. Her face seemed even more tense than the day before. "You were right." Those 3 words hit Joanna like a lightning bolt. The tests were positive for thallium? "Yes," Dr. Thompson confirmed, looking simultaneously impressed and embarrassed. "The levels are alarming." We started administering Prussian blue immediately, but she hesitated, exchanging glances with Laura. "But what?" Joanna pressed. "But it might be too late," Laura completed, her voice faltering slightly. "The doctors say the neurological damage might be permanent." Professor Matthew, who had been silently observing the scene, finally spoke. "When Laura contacted me yesterday, I was impressed by your persistence, Joanna. You didn't give up even when all systems were working against you." "I just did what anyone with knowledge would do," she replied modestly. "No, you did much more," Dr. Thompson interjected. "And I owe you an apology. I should have trusted my scientific instinct and not the hospital hierarchies. When I presented your theory to the team, I was practically ridiculed. Just like you. It was only when Laura demanded the tests that they agreed." "And Edward?" Joanna asked. "He disappeared," Laura replied bitterly. "As soon as the test results came out, we tried to contact him, but he's not answering calls. Hospital security confirmed that he removed all his belongings from the reserved guest room last night." "He realized he would be discovered," Joanna concluded. "Probably because you asked for the specific thallium tests." "Yes, that was my mistake," Laura admitted. "I mentioned to him that we were investigating possible heavy metal poisoning. I thought he should know. After all, he was my father's best friend." Her voice trailed off again. "Don't blame yourself," Joanna consoled. "You had no way of knowing." "We've already called the police," Dr. Thompson informed them. "The hand cream has been seized as evidence, and they are analyzing the security camera footage you mentioned to Laura." "What I don't understand," said Professor Matthew, "is why Edward would do this. The company is extremely successful." "He's already rich." "The merger," Joanna replied promptly. "I heard Edward mention a merger with an Asian group. It was important enough for him to risk everything." Laura nodded. "Morrison Tech is negotiating a billion-pound merger with the hand tech conglomerate. Whoever controls the company after the merger will have access to cutting-edge technologies and a global market. My father was reluctant. He wanted assurances that the British employees wouldn't be harmed. Edward was always more pragmatic." "He needed your father to sign the merger on his terms," Joanna concluded. "And for that, he needed Richard to be mentally debilitated, but not to the point of being unable to sign documents." "Exactly," Laura confirmed. "The documents were scheduled to be signed next week. The plan was perfect. Slow, practically undetectable poisoning, which would easily be mistaken for some rare neurological disease. No one would suspect anything. No one. Except a cleaner with an incomplete chemistry degree," Professor Matthew added, with a proud smile at his former student. A contemplative silence fell over the room, each absorbing the implications of that discovery and the actions that made it possible. "Miss Scott," Laura finally said, her voice now firm and determined, "I want you to know that my family will be eternally grateful for what you've done. If there's any chance for my father to recover, it's thanks to your persistence and intelligence." Joanna felt tears burn her eyes, but she held them back. "Thank you, but I really just did what anyone—" "No," Laura interrupted gently. "Don't diminish your contribution. What you did was extraordinary, and it deserves proper recognition." "Speaking of recognition," Professor Matthew interjected, "Dr. Thompson and I have a proposal for you." "Joanna," Dr. Thompson nodded, taking the floor. "St. Jude's Hospital is in a delicate position, let's say. A cleaning staff member managed to identify a poisoning case that 20 specialists missed. This could be extremely detrimental to the institution's reputation. Or, the professor continued, it could be transformed into an inspiring story of collaboration between different levels of hospital staff, demonstrating how the hospital values the expertise and dedication of all its employees. Joanna frowned, confused. What exactly are you proposing? A rehire, Dr. Thompson explained. Not as a cleaning employee, but as an assistant in the toxicology department. You would work directly with me while completing your studies. Complete my studies, Joanna repeated, suddenly feeling dizzy. Professor Matthews smiled. The University of London has a return program for students who had to abandon their courses due to exceptional circumstances. As your former advisor, I can recommend your readmission, with credits for the courses you've already taken. And Morrison Tech, Laura added, would like to fully fund your studies, including a monthly stipend so you can dedicate yourself without financial worries. Joanna felt her legs weaken and had to lean on the table. It was more than she had ever dreamed of, resuming her studies, working in the field she loved, providing security for her children. It seemed too unreal. I don't know what to say, she stammered, tears now freely streaming down her face. Say yes, Laura replied with a genuine smile. My father always believed in giving back to those who show talent and integrity. When he recovers, and now we have hope that he will, I'm sure he'll approve of this decision. Before Joanna could respond, the room door opened and a man in a suit rushed in. Miss Morrison, I apologize for interrupting, but your father is conscious and asking to see you. Laura jumped up, hope and apprehension mixed on her face. Is he speaking? Is he lucid? Yes, madam. The doctors are surprised by the sudden improvement. It seems the treatment is working faster than expected. Laura turned to Joanna, her eyes shining with emotion. You did this. You brought him back. The antidote did this, Joanna corrected humbly. I just identified the problem. Come with me, Laura impulsively asked. I want my father to meet the person who saved his life. Together, they headed to Richard's room, accompanied by Dr. Thompson. The businessman was sitting up in bed, still visibly weakened but with alert and focused eyes. When Laura entered, his face lit up with a weak smile. Daddy! She exclaimed, rushing to hug him carefully. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, he replied in a hoarse voice but with his humor intact. But I'm coming back. Dad, this is Joanna Scott, Laura introduced, gently pulling Joanna forward. She's the person who discovered what was happening to you. It was she who realized the poisoning when no one else could. Richard examined Joanna intently. Are you a doctor? No, sir, I worked on the hospital's cleaning staff. The businessman's eyes widened slightly. On the cleaning staff. Joanna was a chemistry student, Dad, Laura quickly explained. She saw your symptoms and recognized the signs of thallium poisoning. She insisted when no one wanted to listen to her. She lost her job trying to help you. Richard was silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, with visible effort, he extended his hand to Joanna. It seems I owe my life to you, Ms. Scott. I don't know how to thank you properly. Joanna squeezed his hand gently. Your recovery is thanks enough, sir. No, Richard replied with surprising firmness for someone in his condition. It's not enough. Laura, write this down. I want Ms. Scott to receive all the necessary support to resume her studies, and I want us to create a scholarship program in her name for other talents like her. We've already started organizing that, Dad, Laura smiled. Great minds think alike. At that moment, a commotion in the corridor caught everyone's attention. A group of police officers escorted Edward Allen, handcuffed and with a defeated expression. He had been captured trying to board a flight abroad. When Edward passed the open door of the room and saw Richard conscious, his face grew even paler. For an instant, the gazes of the two old friends, now separated by an unforgivable betrayal, met. No words were needed. Richard's expression communicated everything. Disappointment, hurt, and an iron determination to fully recover what had almost been taken from him. After Edward was led away, a heavy silence fell over the room. It was Richard who finally broke it, turning to Joanna. Tell me your story. Miss Scott, I want to know the person who saw what 20 specialists could not. Hesitant at first, but encouraged by the looks from Laura and Dr. Thompson, Joanna began to tell her journey, her passion for science from a young age, the university scholarship, the loss of her parents, the sacrifice of her dreams to raise her siblings, the night work to support her children, the night studying on her phone, and finally, how she had noticed the peculiar symptoms that no one else had connected. When she finished, Richard observed her with a mixture of admiration and determination. "I've met many geniuses during my career, Mrs. Scott, people with degrees from the best universities in the world, exceptional IQs, impeccable resumes, but I've rarely encountered someone with your combination of intelligence, perseverance, and integrity. It's people like you who should be leading this country's future." "Thank you, sir," Joanna replied, moved. "Don't thank me yet," Richard smiled. "Because what I have in mind goes far beyond a simple scholarship. Laura, call my lawyer. We have a lot of work ahead of us." As she left the hospital that afternoon, Joanna felt as if she were floating. In just 24 hours, her life had taken a complete turn, from unemployed and desperate to a student again with a promising future ahead. She could hardly wait to tell her children the news. At the bus stop, she looked at the imposing hospital building and thought about how she had entered there as an invisible person, a shadow in the night corridors, and now left with her head held high, finally seen and valued for who she truly was. Her phone vibrated with a message from Laura. "Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., Morrison Tech office." "Start thinking big, Joanna. My father doesn't do anything by halves." Smiling, Joanna put her phone away. The future, which just hours ago seemed dark and uncertain, now shone with possibilities. There was a long road ahead, but for the first time in years she wasn't alone on that journey. 2 years later, the main auditorium of the University of London was packed. Proud family members, smiling professors, and anxious students occupied every available seat. On the stage, a line of graduates awaited the moment to receive their diplomas, all dressed in traditional black gowns and mortarboards. "Joanna Scott," the rector announced, his voice echoing through the loudspeakers. A murmur of recognition spread through the audience as Joanna walked onto the stage. In 2 years, her story had become a legend in academic circles. The cleaner who identified thallium poisoning when 20 specialists failed, saving the life of one of the country's most important businessmen, and in the process, transforming her own life. Upon receiving her bachelor's degree in chemistry, with a specialization in toxicology, Joanna couldn't contain an emotional smile. In the front row, her children applauded frantically. Peter, now 14, shouted, "That's my mum," while Mary, 10, jumped for joy. Beside them, Professor Matthew, now a close friend and mentor, applauded with paternal pride. And to the surprise of many, Richard Morrison was also present, seated in an adapted wheelchair. Although the Prussian blue treatment had saved his life, the prolonged poisoning had left permanent sequelae, a slight tremor in his hands and difficulty walking long distances. However, his mind remained as sharp as ever, and his determination had only strengthened after the experience of almost losing everything. After the ceremony, a small reception was organized in the university garden. Joanna, still wearing her gown, hugged her children when Richard approached, skillfully maneuvering his wheelchair. "Dr. Scott," he greeted with a smile, referring to the recent graduate with the title she had dreamed of for so long. "Congratulations on this achievement." "Thank you for coming, Mr. Morrison," Joanna replied, genuinely touched by his presence. "It means a lot to me." "How could I not come? You not only saved my life, but also taught me a valuable lesson about finding talent in the most unexpected places." He turned to Joanna's children. "And you two must be very proud of your mother." "Very," Mary exclaimed. "She's the smartest person in the world." Richard chuckled. "I don't doubt it for a second." Then turning back to Joanna, "Are you ready for the next step? The lab is already waiting for you." Joanna nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through her body. The next step Richard was referring to was the inauguration of the Joanna Scott Institute of Toxicological Research, a center of excellence funded by the Morrison Foundation, created specifically to develop methods for detecting rare toxic substances and their antidotes. "It still feels unreal," she confessed. 2 years ago I was cleaning corridors at night, and now you are simply returning to the place you always deserved to be," Richard completed. "Never forget that, Joanna. You didn't receive a gift. You recovered what life circumstances unjustly took from you." Laura Morrison approached, elegant in a well-cut suit that reflected her new position as Morrison Tech's deputy CEO. After the incident with her father, she had taken over part of the company's operations, proving herself a talented and visionary executive. "We're late for lunch," she announced, hugging Joanna warmly. "And I'm sure the star of the party is hungry after all this excitement." The celebratory lunch, organized in an elegant restaurant near the university, brought together not only family and close friends, but also important figures who had been part of Joanna's journey. Dr. Camilla Thompson, now director of the toxicology department at St. Jude's Hospital, chatted animatedly with Professor Matthew about new teaching methodologies that integrated practical experience from the first semesters. Mrs. Edna, the neighbor who had cared for the children during Joanna's night shifts, marveled as she savored a sophisticated dish she had never imagined trying. Maureen, the former supervisor who had made Joanna's life so difficult, was not invited, not out of resentment, but because life had led them down completely different paths. "A toast," Richard proposed, raising his glass with his slightly trembling hand. "To Joanna, who taught us that true intelligence does not come from diplomas or titles, but from tireless curiosity and the courage to question the established." "To Joanna." Everyone responded in unison as the honored guest blushed, still uncomfortable with the spotlight. After lunch, while the children were distracted with elaborate desserts, Joanna and Richard chatted quietly at a secluded table. "How is Edward?" she asked, hesitant to touch on the delicate subject. Richard sighed. The trial of his former partner and best friend had been one of the most difficult moments in recent years. Edward had been convicted of attempted aggravated murder and was serving a sentence in a medium-security prison. "I refuse all his visits," Richard replied after a moment. "Perhaps one day I will find forgiveness in my heart, but not today. The betrayal still hurts more than the physical after-effects." Joanna nodded, understanding. "And the merger with the Asian group?" That," Richard's face lit up. "We renegotiated on our terms. Hantech agreed to keep the entire UK operation intact and even expand the research centre in London. It was a much better deal than Edward could ever have achieved. And all because you survived to negotiate personally," Joanna observed. "Thanks to you," he completed. "Who, by the way, needs to prepare for your next mission?" Richard took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Joanna. Curious, she opened it, revealing plane tickets and an official invitation letter. "International Toxicology Conference in Stockholm," she read, incredulous. "Me? As a keynote speaker. Your case study on thallium detection in cosmetic products revolutionized safety protocols across the industry," Richard explained. "The scientific community wants to hear directly from the source. And who knows, maybe you'll come back with contacts to expand the institute internationally." Joanna felt a wave of gratitude and determination. Every new opportunity was not just a personal achievement, but a chance to open doors for others like her, brilliant people born into disadvantaged circumstances, whose talents often remained hidden and underutilized. This greater mission had become the main purpose of the Morrison Foundation over the past 2 years. In addition to the institute, the foundation had created a scholarship program for low-income students with academic potential, and an initiative called Invisible Talents that identified employees like Joanna, people in operational positions with extraordinary knowledge and skills in specific areas. "Speaking of the institute," Joanna commented, returning to reality, "have you decided who will cut the ribbon at the inauguration next week?" Richard smiled. "Your children. They are a fundamental part of your story and, consequently, of the institute. Without them, you might not have found the strength to persist when everyone doubted you." Moved, Joanna looked for Peter and Mary. They had grown so much in the past 2 years, not just physically but in confidence and future prospects. Peter was already talking about studying biomedical engineering, inspired by his mother's story, while Mary wavered between medicine and chemistry, unable to decide which career to pursue to help more people, as she put it. Life in the small apartment in Eastwick had been left behind. They now lived in a comfortable house in a middle-class neighborhood, close to both the university and the new institute. They had financial security and, more importantly, dignity and recognition. The day after graduation, while tidying some objects in her new office at the institute, Joanna found a dusty box she had brought from the old apartment. Inside was her first notebook, the one where she had recorded her initial observations about Richard's symptoms. Leafing through it nostalgically, she found an underlined sentence she had written during her nightly research. The invisible often contains the most important answers. How true that had proven to be. Not only in the case of thallium poisoning, practically invisible to conventional tests, but in her own existence, a woman made invisible by the system, possessing valuable knowledge that no one was willing to see. The inauguration of the Institute, a week later, was a grand event that attracted authorities, scientists and journalists. The imposing 5-story building, with laboratories equipped with cutting-edge technology, classrooms for extension programs, and a community service center, represented much more than a research center. It was a symbol of social transformation through science. When Peter and Mary, dressed in formal attire and nervous smiles, cut the red ribbon together, photographers captured not only a ceremonial moment, but the closing of one cycle and the beginning of another. The message was clear. The next generation inherits not only the fruits of their predecessors' struggles, but the responsibility to continue expanding frontiers. In her inauguration speech, Joanna, now with a confident posture and firm voice, shared the most valuable lesson of her journey. True science doesn't just happen in equipped laboratories or renowned publications. It lives in incessant curiosity, meticulous observation, and the courage to question the established. It's in the attentive gaze that sees patterns where others see only chaos. At the Joanna Scott Institute, our commitment is twofold: to advance scientific knowledge in toxicology and to identify exceptional talents in unexpected places, giving them the tools to transform lives, just as I had the opportunity to transform mine. After the event, in the comfort of her home, Joanna hugged her children as they watched the news covering the inauguration together. The reporter, with the illuminated institute in the background, narrated, "A story worthy of a novel, with ingredients of overcoming adversity, justice, and belated recognition of talent." From the invisibility of hospital corridors to leading a cutting-edge research institute, Joanna Scott embodies the British excellence that often remains hidden due to lack of opportunities. "Mom, you're famous," Mary exclaimed, hugging her tightly. "It's not about being famous, honey," Joanna corrected gently. "It's about making a difference." Peter, more contemplative, observed, "You know what's coolest? That you never gave up doing the right thing even when it was difficult." Those words touched Joanna deeply. If there was a legacy she wished to leave for her children, it was precisely this: the courage to do the right thing, even when the whole system pushes in the opposite direction. That night, before going to bed, Joanna received a message from Richard. First mission of the Institute already defined. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Prepare for something big. Smiling, she replied with a single word: ready. And she truly was. Ready to face new challenges, forge new paths, identify other invisible talents. Ready to transform British science with a perspective that valued not only formal knowledge, but the wisdom born of lived experience. Ready to show the world that great minds don't always come with great diplomas or famous last names. Sometimes they are hidden in the most improbable places, just waiting for an opportunity to shine. At the Joanna Scott Institute, that opportunity would be offered, and the world would be better for it. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Joanna Scott's story has deeply touched you. For more inspiring narratives like this, where ordinary people achieve extraordinary feats, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Click the like button if you believe extraordinary talents can emerge from the most unexpected places, and share in the comments if you've ever witnessed someone being unfairly underestimated due to their social standing. With every story we tell, we celebrate the human capacity to overcome barriers and transform lives. Until next time,